Welcome to the Aeronautical Information Optimization Summit, delivering data that matters. I'm Abby Smith, and I'm the Director of Technical Training for FAA and the FAA's NOTAM Modernization Executive Champion. For those of you joining us for the first time for this summit, welcome. We are delighted to have you here to get your feedback and input on how we can make data better. For those of you rejoining us from back at our inaugural summit in November, welcome back. You're going to be delighted to see what we've done since we were together last, and we're interested to hear where you can help us steer the future together. There are people visiting us this time from all over the world, because unlike the last time when it was an in-person event, clearly we're virtual. But the cool thing is our reach has really increased. We have people from Dallas, from Miami, from London, from New York, of course, from Washington, D.C., from San Francisco, from Minneapolis, and many other places. But for wherever you are, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us in this important conversation. Registration has been really impressive, and I just want to remind everybody that this is the first of 6. Notices to Airmen, or NOTAMs, is a major safety priority for the agency. So much so that FAA Administrator Steve Dixon asked that we share the following message from him. Control room.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining the FAA's Aeronautical Information Optimization Summit. Unfortunately, I can't speak with you live today as I had initially intended, and I apologize for that. You know, data accessibility is a top priority of mine, and I'm following the work that all of you are doing extremely closely. Making aeronautical information easy to find and easy to use is very important. In fact, it has a direct impact on aviation safety. And this summit is a great way to get input from everyone who uses our data. Your input is crucial as we work to modernize the aeronautical information system so that we can reduce safety risk and improve the experience for all airspace users. You know, as I was thinking about what I wanted to share with all of you today, I remembered a recent clip of Conan O'Brien showing fictional data generated by everyone staying at home over the past few months during these lockdowns. And some of these made up data visualizations were actually pretty funny. One of them showed that there's been a 60% increase in the number of people eating lasagna in the morning. And another one showed an 80% increase in the number of people who were rooting for the Sharks during Shark Week. Conan had a few more data visualizations like those, poking fun at how we're living in the age of big data. And he's right. We are living in the age of big data. And when it comes to aviation, data is serious business. Data is the lifeblood for every single flight when you think about it. But data is only as useful as our ability to handle it and share it and turn it into actionable information. Big data can sometimes create big problems. For instance, the US NOTAM system is too complicated and too cumbersome. In fact, the system produces more than 1.3 million NOTAMs every year. And that means when a pilot files a flight plan, that pilot has to wade through an average of about 70 pages. That's right, 70 pages of NOTAM information. And some of the critical safety data, such as runway closures, gets buried among those pages and pages of data. The information is not sorted or filtered, so a pilot has to read every bit of it. And as if that weren't enough, NOTAMs are comprised of abbreviations, keywords, and shorthand instead of plain language or graphical depictions. This archaic format obscures a lot of critical flight safety information. Not to mention that everything's in all caps. You actually feel like you're being yelled at. All caps is not the way to convey flight information, and it's probably not a good way to convey most anything. And adding to these concerns is that the US NOTAM system is actually different from much of the world and not in compliance with ICAO standards. And this causes confusion for international pilots and dispatchers and adds to the challenge of sorting for safety critical NOTAMs. The high volume of NOTAMs and the inability to readily interpret them have contributed to high-profile safety incidents, like the taxiway overflight of a passenger plane at San Francisco International Airport back in 2017. The FAA is working towards producing a single, filterable, machine-readable, internet-accessible NOTAM database so that pilots can prioritize critical safety information. We expect the new NOTAM system to be in place by 2022, but you won't have to wait until then to see a big difference. We're making incremental improvements right now. For example, last fall, we realigned NOTAM governance and operational offices into the FAA's Aeronautical Information Services Office, putting NOTAMs and Aeronautical Information, or AI, under one umbrella. This new structure allows the aviation community to work with a single FAA point of contact to improve the quality of aeronautical information provided by the agency to the public. We started consolidating the output sources for NOTAMs from multiple websites and data connections down to a single human interface and a single machine interface. This will reduce the number of places airspace users need to look to find the NOTAMs that they care about. We're making process improvements that will reduce the number of NOTAMs in the system, reduce the amount of information airspace that users must sift through, and improve the consistency with which NOTAMs and TFRs are issued. We retired the Notice to Airmen publication, or NTAP, and are aligning the content and the chart supplements with other aeronautical information sources. These changes will eliminate redundant information and lessen the chance that pilots will receive conflicting information. We're also bringing NOTAM formatting in line with the rest of the world, making it easier for international pilots to find the safety critical information that they need on changes to the U.S. airspace system. These updates will also make U.S. issued NOTAMs more readable for all pilots, including those who may be new to aviation, for example, drone pilots. These are just a handful of many more efforts that we've been undertaking to modernize the NOTAM system. Now, as I said, data accessibility is a top priority of the FAA's, and we are becoming a more digital agency. We're building an enterprise information management system where we can manage all the interfaces and all the data that we have on an enterprise level. And we're building application programming interfaces, or APIs, so that the FAA and the aviation community can exchange information in an easier and more secure way. Some of these improvements, like making better use of APIs, were proposed by some of you. We're living in a brave new data collecting world, and these capabilities are only going to expand and become more important, and it will have a very positive impact on safety. The FAA knows that data is a critical asset, and aviation success will be a function of how well we can handle the data that we currently have, and at the same time be ready to harness future data capabilities as they emerge. We also have to make sure that the data is easy for you to find and use in your everyday operations. Thank you to everyone from the FAA, DoD, and everyone joining us today who have worked together tirelessly to help us reach this stage of progress. This summit series is the perfect opportunity for you to continue making your voice heard as we modernize our aeronautical information system. I ask you to engage with us in this venue. Tell us your data needs, tell us what you think the future of aeronautical information should look like, and then please stay engaged with us as we move forward together in this venture. Well, it was great to talk with you all today, and I hope you have a very productive summit, and I look forward to seeing you in person soon. Thanks.
Administrator Dixon's right. Big data can create big problems, and is only as useful as our ability to handle it. Also, to Steve's point, some information and data, while entertaining, isn't particularly useful. Take, for example, that morning eating lasagna in the morning thing. Our goal at FAA is to create useful, necessary, and accurate information for all of you, pilots, dispatchers, controllers, airport planners, airport operators, programmers, and anyone else that needs to consume our data in order to create a safety in our flying through the national airspace system. It's my distinct pleasure to welcome Jeannie Schiffer, the Deputy Assistant Administrator for Communications, who is going to be our MC for today. Jeannie directs and oversees the agency's internal and external communications to support FAA's mission by connecting people to the information and data they need to operate safely in the national airspace system. Prior to coming to FAA, Jeannie was the Associate Director for Communications for the United States Census Bureau, the largest statistical agency in government, where she led the dissemination of information and data to the media, the public, the businesses, and members of Congress. Jeannie and her team have been instrumental in making this summit and the 5 that are following possible. They're amazing. Thank you so much, Jeannie and team. And Jeannie, welcome. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Abby. We've done a lot since our last summit in November. And at that time, we focused on the modernization of aeronautical data, which informs notices to airmen, or NOTAMs, which are essentially notices that provide pilots, dispatchers, airports, and all other users of the airspace with safety critical information about the airspace and airport facilities and runways. And back in November, as you said, Abby, we had a few hundred participants, about 100 in the room, and the rest were online. And today, everyone is with us virtually, which is great to see. So safety is the FAA's mission, and as we continue to modernize our NOTAM system, we want to hear from you. After all, the system is for you to ensure safe operations, and so we really want your feedback. And I'm very excited that we've got a lot of new entrants here today. And by that, I mean participants from the drone and space industry. These 2 technologies are redefining our airspace, and we're really excited to hear from you. Also joining us today, we have app developers, educational institutions. We have representatives from state and local governments, as well as representatives from International Civil Aviation Authority. So welcome to everyone. And here at the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, we use lots of acronyms. So for those of you who registered, we encourage you to reference the acronym desk guide that was provided via email in advance of today's session. So while we are all becoming digital pros at this point, I would like to highlight a few notes for today's session. So we will be recording today's session, and we encourage your active participation throughout the session. You can share feedback with or ask our panelists questions by using the Zoom Q&A feature. Our team will be monitoring those questions and comments throughout, and we will get to as many of them as we can. So when submitting a question, help us differentiate between whether you're providing a comment or a question by putting question at the beginning of your submission. And if you're joining us via social media, please submit your questions via the link provided there. And one more housekeeping note. This is a virtual environment. We don't anticipate any problems, but sometimes technical difficulties do happen. And for example, I have 3 dogs, so I apologize if one of them runs in the room and crashes our session. So let's get started. Nitesh Manikoff, FAA's Chief Data Officer, is joining us today. Prior to his current role, Nitesh was FAA's Chief Scientific and Technical Advisor for software for the National Airspace System in the Next Gen organization. Nitesh, take it away.
Thank you, Jeannie. Hello, everyone. I'd like to reiterate the importance of this community's feedback. We heard you, and we are acting on what we heard. There were 5 major themes that emerged last November. The need for single data source for each information type, such as airports, routes, received via reliable application programming interfaces, APIs or web services, indicating that there are too many sources of data. The preference for aeronautical information and notices to airmen data in digital formats, specifically in AXIM, JSON, or XML formats. The need for consistent geospatial data and the coding barriers that the administrator referred to, the all caps issue be addressed. The request to have flexibility to manipulate data, for example, filter, parse, sort, based on the context on how the data would be used. And the need to know that the data originated from FAA as the authoritative source. So over the course of the next 6 weeks, we'll cover a variety of topics around the theme of optimizing aeronautical information for you. Our next summit session on August 6th will discuss data standardization and data integrity of aeronautical information. And we'll address themes of the standard data formats and authoritative data sources. On August 13th, we'll discuss transforming aeronautical information, or AI, particularly NOTAM data and Aeronautical Common Services, or ACS. As Jeannie said, we like our acronyms. This session will highlight all the themes from the November summit: APIs, data standardization, consistency of geospatial data, the flexibility to manipulate data, and authoritative data sources. In the next session on August 20th, we'll look at temporary flight restrictions and touch upon the key themes and reiterate the consistency, flexibility theme for TFRs. On August 27th, we'll have the new entrance, the unmanned aircraft systems, a community collaboration with a focus on what the new entrants need today and in the future. Finally, on September 3rd, we look at what's ahead in aeronautical information and Notice to Airmen, NOTAM modernization. This will continue our discussion of the themes we heard here today, as well as look at some of the modernizations we're planning for NOTAMs and aeronautical information in the future. So we're looking forward to a wonderful, energetic session today and over the next 6 weeks. Back over to you, Abby.
Thanks, Nitesh. We've made a lot of progress over the last 18 months modernizing notices to airmen, NOTAMs. But I hope you can see from where we've come. But look, we did not get here alone, and we have a long way to go. We aren't doing this in a vacuum. Stakeholder engagement from people like you in industry is at the heart of how we can do this together, because we're doing this for you. I would like, on that note, to ask Heidi Williams to join me in a conversation about where we've come together. Heidi is a representative from the Aeronautical Information Services Reform Coalition. That's a mouthful. From here on forward, we will call it the AIS Reform Coalition. In her day job, Heidi is the Director of Air Traffic Services and Infrastructure for the National Business Aviation Association, or NBAA. Heidi is a busy lady. She's responsible for NBAA's policy and coordination with the FAA state and local officials and association members relating to air traffic control, air traffic management and design, next gen, UAS, and new entrants. And if that's not enough, she oversees NBAA's air traffic services at the FAA Air Traffic Control Command Center in Warrenton. Heidi's been actively engaged in aviation for over 20 years. She's both a commercial pilot and a flight instructor. The real question is, what doesn't Heidi do? Welcome, Heidi.
Thanks, Abby. Great to see you. Great to be with you, and looking forward to a little chat.
Yeah, it's really nice to see you. I've missed seeing you in person, but I guess virtual is the next best thing to being there. So Heidi, let's get this party started. How has tell us a little bit about the Aeronautical Information Services Reform Coalition and what prompted the coalition to form?
Good question. So industry came together, I guess it was early 2018, with a number of concerns related to both aeronautical data and NOTAMs. And we then met with Terry Bristol, FAA's Air Traffic Organization Chief Operating Officer, in July of 2018. And we shared a little bit about those concerns around aeronautical information and NOTAMs. Just a few examples of the kind of challenges that we shared with Terry at that point. We knew there was a critical need for a point of contact or a central office to work this from the FAA perspective. And we also knew there was an inability to manage data just based on the sheer volume. I mean, Administrator Dixon referenced the 70+ pages that's typical with a typical briefing, right? Inconsistent dissemination has been a challenge, along with sometimes a lack of performance or obstacle data that's not published. You know, that doesn't even touch on NOTAMs, right? So we also referenced already, and Nitesh spoke to that inability to parse and filter NOTAMs, the lack of IKO format, which would really help us, you know, along with domestic and international crossover NOTAMs like TFRs or SNOTAMs. Not to mention out of date or incompliant data that's maybe not maintained or been maintained. So, you know, we listed a number of challenges, but Terry responded really proactively, and the entire ATO team took a look at what we presented. They analyzed that information, and you know, they came back to the table. And as a result of that analysis, you know very well, because you became our champion on the FAA side, the agency side, in helping to work aeronautical information modernization. So for that, we're super grateful.
Thanks, Heidi. Yeah, it's been a lot, but it's super exciting and very rewarding. So from your perspective, how has the coalition collaborated with the FAA to modernize NOTAMs?
So collectively, we decided, it's been over a year ago, which is hard to believe, right? I think March was our year anniversary. We decided to meet monthly to kind of work between the collective teams, FAA and industry representatives, to resolve the challenges and to modernize this information. So I think the coalition really brings to the table an operational perspective from both business and general aviation community, as well as airline community, and from both the cockpit as well as the dispatcher perspective on how NOTAM information is needed and used. So a good example maybe of that collaboration, I would say, is in sharing some of the challenges the industry has experienced in accessing preferential route information, or pref route information as we call it, and the critical need to have that ready access to one trusted source for that data. And that's just really a small component of aeronautical data, but it can critically impact an operator's mission if they don't have access to that accurate route data.
That's great. So Heidi, I remember that meeting. I think it was back in April of 2019. And when you all came into the room and you presented your list, it was overwhelming. I was thinking, I wish I was Santa Claus, because I would have had a shorter list. So it's been fun to work together. So with that in mind, from a stakeholder perspective, what do you think is the greatest achievement thus far for NOTAM modernization?
Well, let me start by saying, honestly, the industry is super grateful for the progress that we've made in the past year. It seems like the year's flown by. There's been progress on a number of modernization fronts so far, right? And I think we'll highlight a few of those over the course of the next 6 weeks. But I think the single, probably most significant achievement is the fact that we now have one central point of contact, one office that industry can go to and work with on aeronautical information initiatives. That's huge.
So I just want to jump in here really quickly and just remind the folks who are watching today that we're taking your questions and also taking your comments. You've got two really great folks here who have a lot of knowledge, a lot of background, and we want your input. We want your questions. So please submit them. You know, don't wait for us to stop talking. You know, give us some questions and we'll field as many as we can. So thanks.
Thanks, Jeannie. I think, though, it might be time to turn the tables. And Abby, my turn.
Okay. Oh, boy.
So how about you tell us about FAA's NOTAM modernization efforts? What goals is the agency working toward?
Well, that's a great question, and I think a great way to maybe generate some questions from the audience. So there's three main goals, because this is such an important safety matter. I think Steve really punctuated the importance of the safety matter. So there are three goals. One was to align NOTAMs and aeronautical information, or AI, into a single office, so that they could because they're really two sides of the same coin. And in that, be able to generate consistent processes, as well as internal directives and protocols, so that we can then not only comply with FAA's directives around aeronautical information and notices to airmen more effectively, but also move towards complying with the International Civil Aviation Organization, what we've been referring to as ICAO during this discussion, so that NOTAM formatting and design is consistent around the world. Because despite the fact that right now we have some border closures, aviation is global, and it's an incredibly important part of our commitment to global leadership. Our second goal around NOTAM modernization is to redesign the current NOTAM system into a single system, because right now it's two, that gathers and processes and disseminates information consistently in a machine-readable, sortable, filterable, archivable format. This is really important for us to simplify that NOTAM data. As Steve said in his video, having things in all caps is like being yelled at, and having it in a different language is confusing. Our third goal was to create a unified training and outreach strata for our feds and our non-fed users of NOTAM information alike. This is really important for us as we teach people, especially how to consistently issue and cancel, and also disseminate NOTAM data. Those are our big three goals, Heidi. And while three is a magic number, in those three goals, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And kind of music to the industry's ears, right? Readable, parsable, filterable, machine readable, super critical, all of those items. And I know you guys are making great progress on getting to that. So from your perspective, why is NOTAM modernization one of the FAA's top safety priorities, and what makes that so important?
Well, domestic flight plans produce hundreds of NOTAMs, and I don't have to tell you that as a commercial pilot and flight instructor. And pilots are required to be familiar with this data before they fly. And 70 pages, I mean, who can disseminate and figure out in their head exactly what in the needle in a haystack is the most important piece of information, especially when they're abbreviated, they're in all caps instead of plain language and graphical depictions. So, think about it. The teletype started in the 1920s. Well, it's the 2020s, and we need to get, we need to modernize and really move forward. We're committed to making, the FAA is so committed to making NOTAM simpler and more straightforward. And we think that this simplification and ability to really sort and filter is going to result in a much safer environment where pilots and other aviation professionals can get the information that they need when they need it.
Let me jump in here real quick, you guys. Just want to make sure we get these questions in from the viewers, because these are good ones. So Heidi, we have a question, I believe it's from Josh, and he wants to know if the coalition has produced any reports or materials for the industry to view. And then Abby, after that, another question is, what source does industry go to for FAA NOTAM data? So those are two really good questions.
Yeah, fantastic questions, Jeannie. So maybe I'll take that first one on the reports or materials for the industry side. So we have certainly many in the industry, from A4A to many of the airlines who all participate, to AOPA, and I'm throwing lots of acronyms at you, right? But those are some of the industry partners on our coalition. They have all done outreach, they have done articles, they have done utilize social media to get word out on what is being done to modernize aeronautical information, but we haven't as a coalition actually done any specific white papers or reports at this point.
Okay. So I guess the question, Jeannie, was where does industry, can you repeat the question for me again? I got so
Sure.
excited about Heidi's answer.
No problem. No problem. Lots of questions rolling in now. So what the question for you, Abby, was what source does industry go to for FAA NOTAM data? Okay,
Thanks again, Jeannie. So there's the place that you would go to search NOTAMs on the web is notams.faa.gov. That's NOTAMS.faa.gov. Or for those of you pilots, November Oscar Tango Alpha Mike Sierra dot Foxtrot Alpha Alpha dot Golf Oscar Victor.
And one follow-up, Abby,
Yep.
What's the current schedule for the FAA transition to the NOTAM format?
So I'm going to say this, I'm not going to give a spoiler alert because we're going to talk about that in just a second. So stay tuned. How's that?
Great tease. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to jump in on that last question too, if you don't mind, Jeannie and Abby. You know, pilots and operators and dispatchers utilize a variety of sources for NOTAM information. We use a lot of the commercial marketplace and vendors. That website that you talked about, Abby, is an amazing resource for getting things like letters to airmen, archived NOTAM information, things that you don't necessarily get from those commercial vendors. And it is a trusted source. So while we have lots of resources out there, it's an FAA resource that provides some additional information you might not be able to access through your commercial marketplace.
And I would just add to that it's the authoritative source. So,
Yeah.
right.
Great ad. So Abby, I'm going to jump in with one last question for you. You got me on this one, right?
Yeah.
So single greatest achievement thus far with our NOTAM modernization effort. And this is a tough one. It's hard to narrow it down, right?
Well, I can't even begin to narrow it down. So let me brag a little bit about what's happened to date. So I think there's there's 6 different buckets of things that I think that we can brag about. One is around consistent data. So you had talked about, Heidi, permanent NOTAMs, or perm NOTAMs as they're known, kind of internal to the industry. There were literally over 1,000 some permanent NOTAMs in the system that had been there for, in some of them cases, like years. Since you brought this to our attention as part of the coalition, we have successfully sunset 75% of those stagnant NOTAMs. In essence, we cleaned up the garage, but here's the good news. We didn't just clean up the garage so we could just throw more things in. We also created major process changes and have worked well across lines of business and organizations internally to FAA to make sure that the processes that we were using make sense for the people that we're serving. And so we've seen a tremendous 75% reduction in the number of permanent NOTAMs and have a really good governance process in place to keep that from becoming a stockpile and adding to the confusion. We also standardized all of our preferential route information into a single authoritative source. Again, things that you and people from the earlier summit in November had asked for, and that's into the National Airspace System Resource, or NASR. Also, a consistent thing that we're proud of is that we standardized, aligned, and automated the output for the chart supplement with information into NASR. And the chart supplement is a really important piece of data for pilots. And while we're talking about consistent data, I just got to give a little shameless plug to tune in for Thursday. For those of you that really care about aeronautical information and NOTAM information standardization, it's going to be a really in-depth discussion about that. And then another area around consistency, and I think Administrator Dixon mentioned it, was the sunsetting of the NTAP, the Notices to Airmen publication. This was a paper product that was about 300 plus pages thick every chart cycle. I mean, it was almost like a forest every chart cycle, and all of the information was redundant. So we eliminated that and pointed people to the places where the authoritative source was so that we could simplify the way people get data. When we think about compliance, something I'm really proud of was how we complied with our reauthorization section 512, which asked us to really make consistent the access to airspace. We brought together major sports organizations and aviation organizations, along with people within the FAA lines of business. And we came up with a way to deconflict airspace as much as possible. As it turns out, by the end of the workshop, everybody had saw a way forward to equitably share the airspace. And I'm really proud about how we were that consistent. Also, when we think about being responsive, we realigned the NOTAMs to put the NOTAMs operations and policy office in the same shop as the Aeronautical Information Services offices. That was something that you and the constituents were insistent that Terry do. We listened to you and we took care of it. And so now, for the first time in our history, there's one place where you can go for authoritative information and for help on for stakeholders to get that information. An example of becoming trusted was just simply the fact that the coalition, you and the coalition members, meet with us every month. So we don't let moss grow under our feet where there's issues. We get up to date and real life examples of processes that we might need to change, policies that need improvement, technology that needs to be improved, or other ways that we could do that. And I think that that's been a wonderful experience for all of us, because it's really helped us understand and focus on the things that are important for the people that we serve. Last example.
Sorry, I wanted to jump in. When you get a chance, I've got a great question here for Heidi. So just let me know.
Okay, let me finish on simplified, and then it'll be back to you, Jeannie. So a last example of how we can simplify is that we sunset something called Pilot Web. That website that I gave you a little bit ago, notams.faa.gov, there were a couple different places where people would go into the web to get NOTAM data. It was very confusing. The user interfaces were different, and one did not allow you to sort, filter, archive, or save your search engines. I'm proud to say that that is sunset, and now everybody uses NOTAM search, making it a lot simpler to get consistent data. We're also in the final stages of sunsetting what we call the Aeronautical, I've got to read this to get it right, Aeronautical Integrated Data Access Portal, ADAP, because again, we love our acronyms. ADAP is a redundant feed, and we're in the process of sunsetting that so that we have one consistent feed, just as we have one consistent web interface. And that's going to be done by in the next couple months. So really proud of what we've done. Now, Jeannie, it's a natural time to ask your question.
So sorry to interrupt you, because that it was a huge accomplishment, sunsetting Pilot Web and launching NOTAM search. So that I should not have interrupted you talking about that. Great achievements. So Heidi, we got a really good question, and I think this is probably a good one for you. Trey Turner asks, a question that we have at the airlines is, to what extent is FAA working with folks on the front end to modernize NOTAM presentation and usage? It's very important that NOTAM sync with apps on the flight deck.
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that's on the minds of most operators, right? So folks who are operating at the flight deck level want to ensure that all of the information they're getting is from a trusted source, it's current, and that it's as easily delivered and readable as possible, right? So I think there's a couple things going on. On the back end of the system, all of the things that Abby has just talked about and going to one integrated data access portal, or ADAP. Everybody is shifting to that portal. The other thing is making sure that sometimes there was differing information among various sources. We're going to one trusted source on this information, so that the commercial marketplace, folks like Jeppesen or Leidos or Lido or others that provide aeronautical information to the cockpit and to operators, will pull from that one trusted source. It's then up to the commercial marketplace to really get innovative in how they share that information via apps and other things. But we have a great innovative environment there. We have vendors that are magnificent at getting creative and sharing information, but it really has to start with a trusted source, trusted data, and that's where we're moving. Jeannie? That sound like an okay response? Do we have any others right now you want to ask us?
Sure, there are quite a few rolling in, which is great. Let's see. How about how does this, Abby? This would be for you. How does FAA plan to align your NOTAM optimization program with ICAO NOTAM modernization initiatives? And let's remind people what ICAO stands for.
Okay, it stands for the International Civil Aviation Organization, or ICAO. So the question is, when are we going to do this?
The question is how.
Oh,
How do you plan to align?
Okay, so how do we plan to align? Well, we're already hard at work. And so we have NOTAM policy working across several lines of business within FAA and working closely with our program management organization and aeronautical information services in general to make sure that the formatting that ICAO uses is consistent. I think ICAO has about 23 different sorting capabilities, and for the United States purposes, including the Department of Defense, because they are our partner as a state level NOTAM service, we need about 19 of those, 15 for FAA, and additional 4 specifically for the military. As we finalize our requirements and refine them, we are going to be reprogramming our NOTAM system to allow these smoother formats. That takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of really smart people and a lot of grit, but it's busy, and right now we're on target. And this is going to be another spoiler alert, because you're going to see it in a little bit. And so we've got a chart to show the progress around the fiscal year 2022 timeline to be fully ICAO compliant. But we've got incremental steps in the meantime that we'll talk about in just a minute.
So great stuff, Abby. I'm going to jump back in, and I know we have a lot of great questions coming in from the audience, but I have a couple more for you before we let the audience questions in. So how did the inaugural summit help shape our NOTAM modernization? Because what we did last November played really an important role in the moving forward. So what do you think?
Yeah, so I think it put the pedal to the metal. You know, so when we think about accelerating, we accelerated by the consolidation of those external NOTAM data distribution interfaces, such as Pilot Web and ADAP, to get to a single authoritative access point. We also accelerated our NOTAM system consolidation to enhance the reliability and the accessibility of the NOTAM platform and enable the transition to the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO's NOTAM format. There was overwhelming feedback from November Summit participants to invite industry to build an application programming interface, or API. I mean, it was all API all the time at that summit to improve the accessibility of NOTAM data, and that is well underway. And lastly, the summit prompted us to begin to move towards digital airspace NOTAMs. And I think we've got, in 3 weeks from now, the temporary flight restriction summit mini-series specifically is an example of airspace NOTAMs. And so that was some of the overwhelming feedback that we got and has really helped us accelerate and focus our plans as we move forward into the future together.
Yeah, I remember last November, we had some amazing input that from folks who weren't typically part of the coalition, got us thinking about some things that we hadn't been thinking about. So a lot of good stuff. So I guess the question is, you know, we have all of this great feedback. You've done some amazing work so far. There's still that collaborative nature between industry and the FAA. But with all of those goals, what's next?
Well, what is next? And here's I'm going to bring a slide up that shows the timeline. What you see in gray is what we've done to date, and pretty proud. It's been a lot. One of the questions earlier that Jeannie had posed to me from the audience was, how are we going to get there and when? So the ICAO formatting is really the next big hurdle. Believe me, in the background, there's a lot of additional process improvement and cool stuff that we're doing that we're going to make sure we amplify and get out to all of you to see and to learn how to consume the data. But the two big milestones come in January of 2021 and then Q4 of fiscal year 22. In January of 2021, we will implement the ICAO formatting for its FICON, and Jeannie's going to ask you to get your decoder pamphlet out. Field condition. These are runway condition NOTAMs. They're a really important safety aspect because it lets pilots know and other aviation professionals what the conditions on different parts of the runway surface are. However, because there's a lot to them, it is proliferated the NOTAMs. In fact, FICON NOTAMs comprise about 73% of all NOTAMs in general. By moving to the ICAO format for this important critical safety information, we're going to reduce the noise in the system and allow people to sort and filter as needed. We think by about 73%. So people will feel an immediate relief in January of 2021. And then we'll continue our work for the other fields that we need to do and the processes and training internally to make sure that we have a seamless delivery to you, the people we serve, in quarter 2022. That's what's next.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to continuing to work with you through that process.
Thanks, me too. So Jeannie, do you have some questions for us?
I have quite a few. Let me just see
right.
which one. It's just figuring out which one to choose here. Let's see. I think, let's check here. Oh, okay, Abby. What is the coalition doing to meet the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2018?
Well, so the coalition's job is to keep the pressure on us. What the FAA is doing to meet the Reauthorization Act, the reauthorization in Section 394 of the 2018 Reauthorization Act reaffirmed the requirement that we had from the 2012 reauthorization around the Pilot's Bill of Rights. And that was to create a single way in for the NOTAM system, or as we call it, origination, and a single way out, or as we call it, dissemination, for the NOTAM system. And I think we've all talked about the fact that there were multiple entry points into the system in different places. When we sunset ADAP and use the Swim Cloud services access to the federal NOTAM system in a few months, we will have created a single entry and a single exit point for NOTAMs. The Reauthorization Act also required us to create machine readable, sortable, filterable, and archivable. The drop that's happening this coming month will create archivable NOTAMs. They're currently, the NOTAMs in the system that are digitized are machine readable. And with the system as we have it right now, you can sort and filter. The sorting and filtering will only continue to get better as we move to the January 2021 dissemination of the ICAO format for the field condition or FICON NOTAMs, and then fully machine readable, sortable, and filterable in Q4 of FY22.
Great. I've got a question for Nitesh. This is a really good
Okay.
question. And how is NOTAM modernization in line with the SWIM concept? And remind folks what SWIM stands for, please.
So SWIM is FAA's System-Wide Information Management Program, and traditionally the operator data required for operations has been published through that system. So this is completely consistent with the SWIM program. It is FAA's job to internally hide the complexity and make sure that the stakeholders see a uniform interface. So the SWIM program and the infrastructure meant for SWIM is being used for this. In future, as the API kind of infrastructure evolves, so will SWIM and the way the data is kind of distributed from FAA. But it is part of the overall system-wide information management program.
Thank you. Here's another good one for Abby. As an airport manager, what do I need to do to remove permanent NOTAMs in the system?
So Jeannie, that's a great question. So there's a couple ways. And so one, this is an opportunity to make a shameless plug for a wonderful feature that we have to give airport operators and their designees a lot more control of managing their notices to airmen or NOTAMs. If they have NOTAM manager, they can simply go into the system if they know that the purpose for the notice is no longer needed. They can just go in and take it out of the system and cancel it. If they don't have that access, they can call their flight service station and have a flight service station professional take care of the NOTAM cancellation on their behest.
Okay, thank you. Here's a great question for Nitesh. I love this question. What are some of the main things FAA can do as an enterprise to provide consistent, reliable, and usable data to its stakeholders?
Jeannie, you are a good partner with us in moving the ball forward on this issue, so I know this is close to your heart. There are lots of people, as Abby described in the question with Heidi, question and answer session with Heidi about NOTAMs, but there's a lot that goes into ensuring that the data that we send out can be trusted, is reliable, is consistent, coordination across the agency, and making sure that the stakeholders who consume it have a say in how we distribute it so that it is in the best format. So there are several initiatives Administrator Dixon kind of mentioned, the enterprise information management efforts that we are undertaking. And part of that is identifying data owners within the agency, the stewards of the data, so that we can find the authoritative source and make sure that the quality of the data is managed at the source. And to the extent that there are duplications within the agency, as with the NOTAM modernization effort, ensure that these offices are collaborating and there is a clear focus on the quality of the data and continuous improvement to that. So a lot of moving parts to make something like that work well, but we have the governance infrastructure and the enterprise capabilities being built to ensure that we continue to improve on that score.
Okay, thank you. And Heidi, I have one here for you. How can we educate pilots on changes to NOTAMs?
That's actually a great question. And honestly, you all can modernize and do a million things. And if we don't share that with operators and users of the system, it's for naught, right? So I'm imploring my colleagues on the coalition and industry partners that are working collaboratively with the FAA and the agency to continue share what we're doing, share via your social media outlets, share that via your websites, talk to pilots and operators. There's no lack of resources in terms of outreach today, right? We have so many social media outlets, we have websites, we all are doing almost daily briefings or outreach to our memberships, those of us who are membership organizations. So lots of ways to do that, but we have to initiate that as the folks on the coalition. And I think we all signed up for that, and we're more than willing to share the word.
Thank you. And speaking of social media, we have a question in from social media. And just by the way, I want to make sure everybody knows we're obviously not going to be able to get to all of these questions, but we are going to take them back and try to get answers for you in future sessions. So please keep the questions coming. So in somebody else posted on social media, what role will FAA's flight service play going forward? Abby, you want to take that one?
Yeah, and Heidi may want to chime in too, because I know we both feel very strongly about flight services. So flight services plays a really important role. They are a defense in depth in our system for getting notices to airmen and other aeronautical information, critical both pre-flight and in-flight for people. Depending on people's comfort level with technology, they may or may not want to access a web page. They may be more comfortable talking to a human being. I look forward to working closely with flight services as we continue to modern, and we have been there, because the flight, just so everybody knows, on the FAA part of this coalition, the director of flight services and the deputy director of flight services is at every meeting and are very engaged. So we look forward to continuing that partnership as we thoughtfully modernize notices to airmen and other aeronautical informations, because they've been such a historically important and continue to be important partner in that process. Heidi, anything to add?
Yeah, I would 100% agree with you. And I think, Leidos is the flight service delivery point for you all right now, has been amazingly innovative, right? So one of the things we've done over the last year is share with our members that 1-800-WX brief, which is the online portal for going to get that information from flight service. And they've largely gone electronic, right? We don't necessarily need to call someone. They have a plethora of information on that portal. They deliver it in an innovative way. And they do a lot of things with the data that make it really easy from a consumer standpoint to access that trusted data from the source. So I think they continue to be a critical partner in all of this.
Thank you. Here's another great question for Nitesh. If the FAA builds an API, would it be public?
Of course, it is for the public's consumption. In some instances, we are trying to ensure that we have a community set up so that we're actually designing the APIs more collaboratively. The API, there are, of course, systems internal to the FAA that interact, and we are shifting to, for some of those systems, we are shifting to an API infrastructure internally. But everything where we distribute data externally, the API would obviously be public. There are, in some instances, there will be interactions with restricted parties. So appropriate security controls will be in place to ensure that we are directing the data meant for the right parties using the appropriate security infrastructure. But the API itself is, of course, going to be public.
Okay. Here's another great question from Ken. He wants to know, and I think this is for you, Abby, will there be an overlapping period where domestic NOTAMs exist with ICAO NOTAMs?
So I think that's a wonderful question. And I think the answer is in a lot of ways, it's going on right now. I don't know if you're aware, but if you go into NOTAM search, and my colleagues in the back gave me an additional thing on the portal. It's www.notams.faa.gov/NOTAM search. But in NOTAM search, right now, you can view NOTAMs in that teletype all caps yelling version. That's the traditional format. And that's in the US NOTAM format. You can view them in the ICAO format, or you can view them in plain language right now. And so if you're tired of having to learn a new language, you can right now look at all three. As we move, and again, this is a big system change, and there's a lot of education and preparation, both internal to the FAA as well as external to the public, that we're going to have to do. And so we're going to do it together, deliberately, and with as much working together with the coalition and with the public as possible, so that we're all educated and prepared. And nothing will be done quickly. And so, Ken, I think the answer to your question is it exists right now, and it will continue to evolve, and we'll be moving slowly and deliberately, because this is a matter of safety, and understanding the information is part and parcel of the safety of the NAS. Heidi, you want to say anything from the industry on that?
No, I think you're spot on. I think we'll continue working this together, but you're right. Our top priority for both coalition and certainly for the agency, it's about safety. And we're going to do this in a way that's measured and makes sense, and safety is number one.
Here's another great question. Abby, how might NOTAM modernization help air traffic controllers?
Oh, I think it's going to help air traffic controllers tremendously, just as it's going to help pilots and dispatchers. Having access to information either in English or in a graphical depiction, so that you don't even have to go through the mental gymnastics of figuring out, oh, they're talking about a point on space on a chart. If it just shows up in a graph, it doesn't require that translation, which takes time away from other important safety tasks of keeping airplanes separated and making sure people are headed in the right direction and avoiding weather. I think that the benefits to air traffic controllers are as much of a benefit as they really are to pilots for that reason. Simplifying things in a world where we have too much information only makes sense. Because when you need information, especially in an emergency, trying to sort and filter and then translate from a meta language that was built in the 1920s is tough.
I think the other piece of that, if I can jump in, Jeannie, is to
Sure.
say that air traffic controllers have been a key collaborator with us through this entire process. We knew from day one they had to be sitting at the table working with us, and they've done just that. So they've been a great contributor.
Yeah,
Great.
NACA is a member of the coalition and provides wonderful input and feedback, helping us in this modernization effort.
Great. So one of my favorite topics, here's another question, APIs. Nitesh, you mentioned earlier, we talked about, our API certainly being available to the public. So here's a great question. How can industry work with the FAA on API development?
Great question. There was, as Abby mentioned at the beginning, there was tremendous interest, even at the very beginning in the last session, on APIs and collaborating with FAA on that. And you are going to see the fruits of that in other parts of the summit. You will see more detail, so I don't want to steal the thunder fully. In the last session for the summit, September 3rd, we will take a little bit more time and go into that API collaboration question a little bit more. What we intend to do is improve our presence on the web so that folks can have a community on the web and collaborate there as we evolve the design of these things, as we prioritize which assets have to be API enabled first. And I'm talking about broader set of data assets than just what we are talking about as aeronautical information. FAA, as you know, has a lot of other safety related data assets for historical analysis and so forth. So we are in the process of improving that and improving our presence on the web. Stay tuned. I don't want to take away everything from the future sessions.
Great, great. Let's see. Oh, you know what? We're almost out of time, but again, we are going to try and get to every one of these questions in future sessions. These are great questions, and I wish we could get to all of them. But I think we are coming to getting close to the end of our session here today. We'll remind everybody we've got 5 more coming, so stay tuned, as Nitesh just said. And now we have a video summarizing some of the things that we've talked about. So control room, let's roll that.
Notices to Airmen, or NOTAMs, deliver safety critical information. They help pilots identify where they can fly, airspace restrictions, and other crucial safety information. Right now, the FAA is taking important steps to modernize the NOTAM system for all our stakeholders. Over the last year, and with feedback from industry stakeholders like you, we've achieved a lot. We've begun removing duplicative information found in the chart supplements. We've retired the Notice to Airmen publication, or NTAP. Pilots can access the information previously found in the NTAP through the Domestic Notice and International Notices webpage. We started the transition from the Aeronautical Information Data Access Portal to the SWIM Cloud Distribution Service. We sunset Pilot Web, and we canceled 75% of the original permanent NOTAM list, clearing out redundancy and making way for the information pilots need most. We've accomplished a lot together, but there's more work to do.
Okay, thanks. So we are getting close to the end. So I want to see if we have any closing thoughts today from our panelists. So Heidi, anything you want to add here at the end?
The only thing I'll say is thank you to all who attended. We're looking forward to you participating in the upcoming sessions. And I would really encourage you, there's some great stuff ahead. So come back and join us next week.
Thank you. Thank you. How about Nitesh?
As I said at the outset, we listened to you from the last session. We are eager to hear from you and collaborate with you. So thank you for taking the time to participate and keep the questions coming. It improves the product that we put out. Thank you.
Thank you. And Abby, over to you. Any closing thoughts?
Yeah, thanks, Jeannie. It's just an honor to be able to be a part of a huge team at FAA, and literally folks that are from outside of FAA that are participating with us today. There are hundreds of dedicated, smart, caring professionals that are taking this safety matter so seriously and are putting their life energy in to making the NAS safer. Your feedback is so important because we're doing this for you and for the safety of the NAS. And so any help that you can provide us with your input and ideas of how we make and modernize this important safety feature better is so welcome and so wanted. Thank you so much for your time.
Yes, we've got 5 more sessions coming up. They're the next 5 Thursdays, so please join us. And please follow us on social media. And again, like I said, we're going to try and get to all the questions that came in. If you want to send us something in the meantime, just want to make sure you've got the hashtag here. And thank you to everybody for tuning in, and we will see you next Thursday. Thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you.